Hi Riyadh, welcome and thank you for joining us. There's a lot going on currently in data analytics and in particular AI all over the world across all sectors. Just your views on how that's going to shape in the next 5 to 10 years within financial services.
It's a good question. I think an important thing is that financial services should probably be treated more as a sector than an industry. There's so many differences within financial services, and a corporate finance animal is very different from a retail banking animal. And the way that analytics and AI is going to affect them is going to be very, very different. I would say in the retail banking world, there's going to be a lot of focus on core activities like marketing and risk, because there are already very sophisticated data foundations there. And in the corporate and investment banking world, there's probably going to be a lot of focus on deepening client relationships and trying to use these tools to better differentiate yourself relative to your peers.
So, with a lot of fintechs and small startups or large startups entering the fray, it's often a challenge for big banks to compete, whether it's around time to delivery of new products or services that are quickly becoming available that we perhaps need to catch up on or to differentiate ourselves. How in the data analytics space do you think we can keep up with what's happening in those areas?
I think it's interesting that neobanks are now starting to reach maturity. I remember when Starling and Revolut and the like got started, there was a lot of cynicism about their prospects because they weren't profitable for a long time. Now you're starting to see them hit profitability. You're starting to see them get valuations of 40 billion pounds plus. And people are starting to take that proposition a lot more seriously. I think in the future, you're going to see a lot of these startup propositions attack narrower parts of financial services businesses. Typically in financial services, there's a bulk of services that get provided, and it gives an opportunity for startups to tackle a particular individual part of that proposition very, very directly. You're going to see a lot more of that. In the commercial investment banks, I think that there's going to be a lot of replication of what the neobanks are starting to do. You're going to have a lot of these smaller, lighter weight players that aren't encumbered by a lot of legacy technology who are able to move a lot quicker. In terms of what can existing players do, the big advantage that existing players have is their data. They have long histories of deep financial information of their customers, which can allow them to personalize interactions and understand their businesses really intimately. I know that RMB is doing some great work on that. That's probably going to be the biggest moat and the biggest defense that you can launch against the incumbent players.
And I guess on top of what you're saying, given your comment around the fact that many of these new players are focusing on quite narrow slivers of the value chain, the fact that we see across that allows us to look at a customer across multiple points in their journey, whether it's from a corporate client in terms of their EFT and cash, merchant services, treasury initiatives, as opposed to one of those in isolation, which naturally brings across quite an integrated value proposition.
Absolutely. I think the challenge is just going to be operating in a way that isn't siloed. Very often you might have part of that proposition that is sub-economical, and that's cross-subsidizing a different part of the business, which just gives an opportunity for somebody else to go in and attack that proposition. There's going to be an imperative for banks to be very clear on the value contribution of each parts of those businesses.
I often give an example of how, say, 20 years ago, people who were computer illiterate could get by fine doing their jobs on, dare I say, paper and pen and that sort of thing. Whereas today in most jobs, you'd be redundant if you weren't able to use a computer, reply to emails, schedule all those wonderful meetings we love sitting in. I guess although data isn't new in the same way the computer came out, I guess it's gaining prominence in a similar way, that you need to be data literate at the very least in order to stay relevant.
Yeah, and the upside is that the barriers to entry for using it are very low. I think that Gen AI has entered our world extremely easily, and executives on the whole, I find, are embracing it. But my guidance to executives who aren't is to get with the program. I think that life is going to change drastically within the commercial enterprise over the next generation, and those that aren't familiar with the tools that are going to suffer.
So with the world ever changing as it is today with data, analytics, and AI, how is it that you see executives and senior leadership need to start changing the approach, to start adopting a data-driven approach?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I just gave a talk to your team talking about how analytical projects need to be driven by commercial executives to be able to generate actual outcomes. And we're probably going through one of the most transformational phases of technology now. And it's my belief that firms that embrace this new regime are the ones that are going to really capitalize on the opportunity. If you take the internet, for example, it's firms that embedded this within their business at the outset that weren't scared of tackling those problems and engaging with it, that did far better than those firms that waited to do so. So my guidance to executives would be to engage with it and to get with the program. Our CEO gave a recent talk saying that 30% of executives might not exist in 3 years. And I think that that's true, but the emphasis should be on the upside that's available for those executives that really do embrace this.